One factor of Gen AI proliferation we haven't talked about so far is risk. AI leaders in government and industry are applying risk management tools to their execution and acquisition. Jeff Jones is head of revenue for the Americas for poolside.ai. He says the first thing to think about in that area is how the tools were created.
What is the data that went into those models? Where did the data come from? How is that data licensed? Then when you take those models and you take them on a mission or to an organization or to an agency, how do you want to deploy that? Is it required to be air-gapped? Should it go in a VPC? Should it be on-prem? What type of accreditations do you need in order for it to be successful for that as well? And then there's the end use case. What you're trying to do is make engineers more productive, because we're focused on software development with our Gen AI solutions. And by doing that, how are they interacting with the models? What type of information are they putting into it? Is it secure? Where is that information going? And what kind of data is coming out from that as well? I was talking to an agency, in fact, this week, and we got this question. So it's an interesting question. It said, Jeff, how do you know when you get a recommendation from a model, how do you know where it came from? Like, can you trace it back to the exact place where it came from? And I think it's important to step back and think about, like, this is based on a neural network. So think of like the human brain. It's really hard to see or determine where an exact point of information came from. So a friend of mine gave me this analogy. Like, imagine I'm a tomato farmer and you bought some tomatoes from me and you really like my tomatoes, but you said, I want to know the exact place on the farm where those tomatoes came from. And I don't know the exact place where those tomatoes came from. We don't have GPS on our tomatoes, but really I need to figure out why you're asking that question. And the reason you're really asking that question is you want to know, is there pesticides in these tomatoes or any kind of chemicals? And I can guarantee that there's no pesticides or chemicals because I know what's happening in the soil. It's the same thing with LLMs. As long as you know where the source data is coming from and it's properly licensed, you can have confidence.
What are the agencies doing well, and what are they having a harder time with, in your view, to understand all of the components of what you just described?
I mean, I think the first thing is being able to deploy it in an area that they feel comfortable in. And so that's the first thing, because there's not a lot of options out there. The second piece is just trying to understand what you want to do with it and what your use cases are before maybe getting mired in all the security and compliance type questions, and then fitting to that as you go through the implementation. I think the other piece that's important, take technology out of it. It's the change management. You're changing how agencies and missions and like they're interacting on a day-to-day basis. So it's the incentives you're creating and the change management and just training of team members in order to use the platform and the tools in that regard.
A lot of government entities are starting their AI journeys, Gen AI journeys, by using their own data and not using stuff from outside their own four walls. Is that good? Is that good to a point? Is that maybe not as helpful as it could be, or neutral?
I think using your own data is great. I think using your own data in combination with some of the most powerful LLMs out there is an even better combination, as long as you know that those models that you're working with are correct in the different type of compliance and how they were built and generated and where they're deployed. So using your own data on a mission is really important, because then you have the context of the code bases and the software development lifecycle and how you work. So that's a really important facet when going forward with these types of implementations.
For decades that I've been in this space, government technology leaders have said, I don't really have time to figure out what's over the horizon because I'm drinking from the fire hose of what I have to deal with today. That's really become accelerated with Gen AI because of the unpredictability. I mean, it kind of showed up on the landscape for people 12 to 24 months ago. What do you tell folks that are trying to understand what may be coming, maybe not available to them today, technology-wise, data management-wise, any of those factors, and they're trying to figure out, what do I at least need to keep my eye on for the future?
It's a really good question, and it's good that we're becoming more forward-thinking, but it's also important, I guess, to kind of answer that in a different way. for us to set reality of what you can do. I think people get really excited about AI and they think it can solve everything, and we're just not there yet. And so it's important to know what you're trying to do with your exact requirements and use cases and work to that. Because where we are right now in Gen AI and software development, it's really about code assistance. It's about human in the loop, which I think is really valuable to your first question around compliance and security. So humans always involved, but what we want to do is we want to improve that for the future. And what a lot of organizations and agencies are asking us for is really agentic type services. And so it's where you can take some of the burden off of software engineers and maybe some of the synchronous tasks and help them where they could like press a button and then 3 or 4 hours later, many different tasks could happen. It could be on the modernization of code or refactoring of code, but then it goes through security scans and integration scans. And then it comes back for review. And so to take that burden off, but we're not there yet. I think there's a big reason why we're not there yet. Today, there's only a certain amount of data that can be used to train these models. So there's about 20 trillion tokens of useful web data, 3 trillion tokens of code data, but it's only growing, it's growing fast, but not fast enough to make these models much more intelligent to get to those agentic tasks. So we need to come up with ways as model providers to create synthetic data and do it in a safe and genuine manner. And by creating that synthetic data, we can get past this data hurdle, data void, to make these models more intelligent by feeding them this information.